From China, the world now turns its concern about the coronavirus toward Japan, which has seen a spike in infections. What lessons in epidemic containment can China possibly share with its Asian neighbor? Meanwhile, a stunning revelation about decades-long U.S. espionage operations using a Swiss company. How much credibility will it cost the U.S., especially when accusing a company like Huawei of potential spying? Welcome to The Point, an opinion show coming to you live from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. Japan is stepping up efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19 as Japan's health minister warned the nation is entering a new phase in the outbreak. According to CCTV, China's national television, with 615 cases, Japan has the highest number of confirmed cases of the virus outside of China. Among them, at least 542 stem from the Diamond Princess cruise ship, which ends its quarantine on Wednesday. So how dire is the situation, and which lessons can Japan apply from China's handling of the outbreak so far? Joining me from Tokyo is Kukhee Choo, media and cultural studies scholar. From Washington, D.C., Cheng Li, director of the John L. Thornton China Center at Brookings Institution, and in Beijing, Professor Rong Ying, vice president of the China Institute of International Studies. So welcome to all of you. I want to highlight that since the beginning of the first cases in Japan, the Chinese people have been watching very closely, not just because of the close geographical distance, but also because of the outpour of solidarity, of warm-hearted messages and support from the Japanese people to the people in Wuhan and in China in general. So we have been watching, we have seen the numbers been going, and actually the level of anxiety and concern has also been growing among the Chinese public, because they have seen that the number has been going up, especially as a result of the quarantine on board the Diamond cruise ship. So I want to go to Ms. Kukhee first. We see different messages coming out of Japan. For instance, Takashi Wakita, the head of Japan's National Institute of Infectious Diseases, said the country was in initial stages of the outbreak and could see cases continue to spread. And yet it seems that the health minister Katsunobu Kato said there was no evidence the virus was spreading widely in Japan, although he said it might and that the government had to prepare. So, Ms. Chu, exactly how serious this is the situation, and how would you describe the approach adopted so far by the Japanese government, and help us understand that approach, please?
Well, so far there have been more than 600 people that has been confirmed infected by the virus, and we're talking about people who have been seriously infected, who have been hospitalized, and 540, a little over 540 of those have come from the Diamond Princess cruise ship. So in the general population, there are about a little over 60 people. However, saying that, in the Japanese media, when these reports of infection have occurred, they're basically reporting in snippets. So the general public are not really aware of how widely spread the disease is. For example, the news would report, and the newspapers would report like, oh, they're like one person or two people have been further infected, or there are 3 more people. So it seems like the total tally has not been widely known to the public as much unless they really pay attention to it. So the concern right now in Japan is that the coronavirus has been more widely spread without people knowing, and even the officials knowing.
Dr. Li, watching from Washington, D.C., you have been watching the situation in China as well, especially the initial delay, let's say, by the local government or by the system to handle the crisis. And later on, we had a very difficult period of time, only seeing some light at the end of the tunnel at this moment. Seeing the Japanese situation, how serious do you think the situation is in Japan?
Well, only time can tell how serious it is or will be. But I think one should take the situation very seriously, because it has potential to have a widespread effect. But at the same time, I don't think people in Japan should be panicked. We should put into perspective, in China, the case, infected reached 74,000. But in Japan, is actually now is 700. It's already surpassed 600. And also the mortality rate, in China is relatively high, but 2% or 3%, it depends on which area you talk. But the total deaths, the cases of deaths is 209. Japan is only 1. I hope that will remain that number. I think it's very, very important to put that in perspective. I think the majority of those affected are related with the Diamond Princess ship. Now, this raises a question about your question, the second part, how Japanese government handle that. I don't want to be judgmental. I think that certainly at the moment, we still do not know whether these affected people occur because of a quarantine period or after that. And certainly people can argue whether it could be improved or insufficient and etc. But I think that early on there's a good intention from the Japanese government. I mean, let's face the number. There's these passengers come from 50 countries. If you let these people release, I mean, this is not responsible because this can widely spread to some other region. But of course, some people criticize that maybe there's a political reason, maybe there's a concern about the Olympics, whether should postpone or not postpone. But this is, again, we just speculation. We do not have evidence to comment on that.
All right. Well, in the past week, Japan has taken more steps to curb the outbreak, including asking the public to avoid non-urgent, non-essential gatherings or scaling back the Tokyo Marathon, cancelling public birthday celebration for Emperor Naruhito next week, or announcing a reduction or suspension of flights to mainland China due to the outbreak. So I want to go to Professor Rong. From China's perspective, from what has been effective in the Chinese fight against the virus, how do you look at these measures? And do you think the Japanese government has taken enough measures or has realized the severity of the fight that they're potentially faced with?
Well, I think I share to some extent Dr. Li's perspective that possibly we need to take a rather balanced sort of views about what is happening in Japan and how to judge or in what way that the government, Japanese government sort of responses should be on which ground, I mean, Japanese government, the response should be judged. To be fair, I think the Chinese people are certainly watching the development of the epidemic in Japan with great sort of concern. It is partly because, of course, I think in China, as the epidemic still ongoing in other places, other provinces, besides the Wuhan and Hubei, there are some positive development. In the meantime, I think what Japan, the Japanese government, the Japanese people, and the Japanese nation as a whole, I think their responses to the Chinese Chinese that has raised a kind of solidarity or sympathy that
we'll talk about
China
that
should.
We'll talk about that in just a moment, Professor Rong. I want to talk about China's lessons and experience that could be possibly applicable to the Japanese experience. I want to go back to you, Professor Rong, in just a moment, but let me ask Ms. Choo, who is based in Japan, what has the Japanese people, the Japanese public, taken away from China's fight so far? It's been about a month, for instance. We had very drastic measures, and obviously there were panic, there were a lot of fear, and the hospitals were overwhelmed. So how are the Japanese general public sentiment at this moment, and how do you look at the measures that China has been put in place? Is there any possibility that they would go as vigorous as that?
I don't think that actually that the problem with the media portrayal of the Chinese situation has been that not much information has been coming out from Wuhan. Everything that people rely on are unfortunately have been through the social media networks. And it seems like the Chinese government, at least the impression is that the Chinese government has been controlling the information that was being released outside of China. So in a similar vein, it seems like the Japanese are concerned that it seems like they're not getting the full picture from the official accounts. For example, how many people got infected or how many people died. So there's this doubt that is being instilled. And yet at the same time, one of the concerns concerns that I have personally is that the media all around the world, not just limited to Japan, has been limiting this coronavirus as a Chinese thing, right? So it's like a regional thing. Therefore, there has been some kind of like national and ethnic ties to this very disease, as we see around the world where there's like rising forms of like, racism against Asian people, people, basically attacking. And so in that sense, I think that the awareness in Japan has been that, oh, this is a Chinese thing. It won't come to Japan. And we see that in today's release of the 500 people from Diamond Princess. They said that they were quarantined enough for, 14 days, therefore they can be released. However, people could get infected, like even touching the rail coming down of that ship. We don't know how the disease is being spread accurately. And even if the scientists or the doctors knew, that information has not widely been, released around the world. So I think that people are feeling concerned about that. And today, when the Japanese government basically said, okay, they can be released, the public sentiment is like, isn't that a little too premature to release them? Shouldn't they be quarantined like the United States is doing? So there is like a wide voice of dissent in that matter in Japan right now.
Dr. Li, we've had a very difficult period, Spring Festival break, all kinds of battle against the virus, but battle against all kinds of information, sometimes true information, sometimes fake disinformation. From your perspective, what do you think is the lesson that Japan has to avoid, and what is some of the precautionary measures maybe Japan can draw some inspiration from China's fight as well?
Sure. In the early days and the weeks, certainly there's a problem of slow response and misinformation. I think certainly the Chinese national government want to fix that. They now release data and information very quickly. And early on, also there's obsession with the political stability and the lack of transparency. This is also a problem China will learn its lesson. I think that the Japanese certainly should learn that lesson, and also I would say honesty is the best policy. Secondly, I think that what happened in China is the number is astonishing, that the medical professions affected by the virus is very high. One source said it's over 3,000. Certainly 1,700 are confirmed. That's a huge number. I think that certainly should avoid. That really hit the country, had the moral, morality and this kind of things very, very highly. So I think that we probably will learn from China to establish the specialized hospital to deal with that. And finally, I think people should learn draw a fine line between personal privacy and the community connectivity. I think the liberty and security stand best when they stand together. But the reality is sometimes you need to make a choice, but still you need to draw a fine line. I think this is a lesson that the international community and the Chinese should learn.
Okay, I think there's a little bit of a small detail I might need to correct here or clarify. The 1,700 are the doctors or nurses who have been infected while on duty, and it's a cumulative number. So we need to put that into perspective. But before we go, I want to highlight two pieces of social media information that has been posted by the spokesperson Rong Ying from China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Today, she posted on Twitter a painting or Chinese calligraphy which says literally in English that as friendly neighbors across the sea, we stand together and come to each other's help. She's clearly talking about Japan, and got a lot of thumbs up for that. And also from China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, spokesperson Geng Shuang says China feels the same way as Japan does, as both countries are facing the challenge of COVID-19 while fighting a tough war against the virus at home. We're ready to share information and experiences with Japan and provide support and assistance as much as we can. So clearly the messages of friendship, of solidarity are there, but we won't have the time to discuss this time. Many thanks to my guests, Kukhee Choo, media and cultural studies scholar based in Japan, Dr. Cheng Li, director of the John L. Thornton China Center at Brookings Institution, and Rong Ying, vice president of China Institute of International Studies.